Come. So what's interesting here and why I love Josh that you wouldn't believe, but he's the one advocating for blockchain fighting in a nice way or debating with Web2 or so-called people. It would be nice if you would go and check his political interviews on YouTube with crypto skeptics. He has lots of major arguments on how to defend the right for blockchain or decentralization in broader sense exist at all. And he goes straight away political. And this talk, I think, would be on the intersection of activism and the privacy and the tension in between them. And last but not least, chase him for his books, Blockchain Radicals. People just should read more. And he has some HDMI?
Yes.
This one. Yeah. Thank you. And what's important here that we slowly move from sort of lack of activism to the activism itself, and it's a nice transition also from the free speech, because I think what the Department of Decentralization is doing is a pure activism. You can call it a tech activism in that sense. We can chat with someone at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of message I'm going to get.
Go.
All right. Make sure nothing... Hope nothing comes up. Okay. So hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Josh. I have books in my bag. I have a lot of books. So if you're interested in reading, I'm selling them for 20 euros. Come get me afterwards. Pretty quick, so I have to go to a dinner. But for my talk, I wanted to talk about the tensions that I see based on my experience between anonymity and solidarity. So on one side, we have, the need to protect our identities in particularly difficult situations, while also, especially in the context of social movements, but however, the need for cultivating solidarity between the people who also take part in that social movement at the same time. And I think, I just wanted to talk a bit about maybe my experience, just personally, why I kind of became interested in this topic. I have a blog and a podcast called Blockchain Socialist. You can imagine what I talk about. And so I didn't want, when I first started out a few years ago, I didn't want my employer to know what I was doing, what I was up to, because it would be a really awkward conversation with my boss to explain why I was, why I had a podcast on the side of my job. I also didn't want to lose my job because I still need to make money in order to pay rent and whatever else. And in the process of making the podcast and everything, I started different online communities and started meeting people who also felt similarly in this weird intersection of crypto and more left-wing politics, and therefore met a lot of people online via Discord, Reddit, or whatever other platforms who wanted to reach out and try to do stuff together. However, over the internet, there is this, of course, culture of being anon, of sharing your username, and that's how you know the person. But in a context of wanting to do any sort of left-wing political movement, there's also an aspect or a culture of really getting to know the other person who you are doing stuff with. You don't want to feel like you can't trust the people that you are potentially going to very dangerous situations with. And so it's an important aspect. And I only came out of the anon closet after I wrote this piece for Outland called Fork Your Society, I Want Out, which is about the network state, because I was asked to write a book. And so I was asked by my publisher to not be anonymous anymore, because I was asked to be a public figure in order to defend the points that were in my book. That's something that they required, and so I kind of complied with that. And so what I found a lot of the times is that I would, meet people online, especially when I was anonymous, and they would be like, oh, what do I call you? Or what's your name? Or am I supposed to know this information about you? And it'd be this really kind of awkward back and forth where at least for me, I didn't really care if the other person knew a little bit about my life, and often case it happened where they would know my name, so I would simply share it. But other times I would meet people and they would be very, very guarded about who they are, what they do, what their kind of like goals are, and it would really, really frustrate me because it'd be like, what do you think I'm going to do? Like, it felt that they could not trust me, even though I was, I mean, especially now as a public figure, but even then, public, at least in the internet. And so I kind of wanted to like force myself to deal with this, like these contradictions that I saw in this space. But, so, we're talking about solidarity, and I wanted to make people a little bit uncomfortable by singing a song. So you guys all have to sing it with me so that we can lighten up the mood a little bit, because I know it's been like a very, heavy day today talking about privacy and anonymity. So this is like a standard like labor union song that people in labor unions will sing together whenever they're at protests. Like everybody knows it. So usually it's, you say solidarity forever 3 times, and then they say, for the union makes us strong. However, since this is a crypto thing and some people may think whatever about unions, maybe we can say, for the blockchain makes us strong as a compromise. Is that okay with you guys? Do you guys know the song? Does anybody know the song? It's very simple. I can start singing it, and then we'll go, and then it'll start bringing people in, okay? You ready? Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the blockchain makes us strong. Solidarity forever. I don't hear everyone. Solidarity forever. Daniel. Solidarity forever. For the blockchain makes us strong. Now one more time. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the blockchain makes us strong. Woo! Yeah, good job. You guys all sang wonderfully. It was beautiful. So did you feel the cringe? Did you feel it? Like deep in your bones? Like, did that feel uncomfortable? Because it might for people who like don't do it often or aren't a part of different types of movements, haven't gone out to things. Like it feels a little bit uncomfortable your first time, right? But congratulations, you made like a very, very small baby step into feeling what it's like to experience solidarity. And like to me at least, like music is like one of those rare kind of places that are somewhat normalized where you can kind of experience a sense of collectivity because you're all kind of singing more or less the same thing, right? And so I want you to like hold on to that feeling of solidarity and like also think about how it plays with this, with anonymity at the same time and privacy. And so to explain, just for people who may not know exactly what solidarity means, when we talk about solidarity, this is not like charity. So this is a famous quote from Eduardo Galeano, where he says, "I don't believe in charity, I believe in solidarity. Charity is so vertical. It goes from the top to the bottom. Solidarity is horizontal. It respects the other person. I have a lot to learn from other people." So it's meant to be a conceptual framework for being able to relate to one another in a more horizontal type of way, and is not meant to be this kind of like paternalistic view on like helping others, that charity is kind of like basically what defines it. So they're very, very different things. And it's a feeling. And so this is also very important in like workers' movements, right? Whenever you are in a kind of like worker struggle, there is this idea that there are like the workers that need to come together, they need to collectivize and show off their power. They need to act as a kind of single unit as a way to fight back against the kind of like rights as they are taken away by them, by their employer, whether that's like lowering wages, whether that's taking away certain benefits, whatever that is. The way that, in unions and in worker movements, you view how to build up your own power is by having a collective single unit in which there's solidarity between the individuals that make up that unit. So it's not meant to be to rid yourself of your individuality, but is instead to build those relationships of solidarity in order to create a coherent collective identity. And so surveillance is a workers' issue. People who work in, for example, Amazon workplaces, but this is also a continuation of a long history of labor struggle. But in the Amazon warehouse, you have cameras that are constantly watching, how many packages they do and like how many times they have to take a piss and like all these various metrics that they're always measuring about people and what they do with their time, whether or not they're making certain KPIs being met. This is an extension of the already existing history of basically floor managers. Floor managers were the people who were surveilling factory workers on the floor and making sure they were constantly working and doing these various disciplinary mechanisms to make sure that they were always on task and whatever else. These cameras and these digital systems are simply an automation of those responsibilities and of those things that the floor manager were already doing, except now it's just become at such a much more intense level to where they're counting the amount of time you take to go pee. And so I think this is like an important context when we're thinking about privacy, when we're thinking about anonymity. This is something that not only affects simply people who are fighting against the state in some big fashion, but also because they are simply working and trying to make their ends meet. And so when we're talking about in the context of social movements, a really good source of information is the CIA on how they use surveillance in order to destroy social movements. So if you can read the text here, this is like how they interfere in social movements. They recommend agents that interrogate into different groups to talk as frequently as possible, to bring up irrelevant issues, haggle over precise wordings of things, to refer back to matters decided upon at the last meeting, to bring it back up, to slow down the whole process, to be worried about propriety. They also talk about things in like how to stop things at work. So this is often a tactic to slow down labor unions, to make labor unions appear as some like giant inefficient monstrosity. So they would do things like spread rumors. They would work very slowly. There's a whole like list of things you can see to perhaps watch out for in case you're worried of a CIA agent. But I think this is, again, like surveillance is not a new issue simply because of digital systems, but digital systems have definitely intensified the kind of surveillance apparatus that is available to kind of curtail various types of social movements, whether that is in labor unions or whether that is in another like activist kind of situation. And so when it comes to internet surveillance, of course, like I'm sure a lot of you already know these things. So I took a very generic picture off of Google Images to, we already know that with like high intense surveillance, we have the effects of society where people become suspicious of each other, they become paranoid, it becomes like very awkward to know if you're always being watched to do certain actions and commit to certain things. This is something like, in general, internet surveillance kind of how it affects society. And then, so if we peer into a little bit closer into the internet and the differences between the meet space where like I can see you, you can see me, I'm wearing this shirt, I have shorts on, you have all this contextual information about who I am and what I probably do that you can potentially deduce just looking at me, that is not seen through just an avatar, right? Even if I just put an avatar of this guy's face or whatever, you get still a lot less contextual information than in the meet space. And so in the digital space, while there are a lot of affordances that it provides and whatever else, one of the things that it cuts off is the contextual information that we kind of see as by default whenever we're meeting up in person, that the digital isn't necessarily able to make up for. And so I think, if we're looking at like how kind of a lot of DAOs turned up and like how a lot of the culture in crypto is at the moment, I think this has a very large effect, that this is like a form of like abstraction so much in a way that like our brains were not evolved to ever handle. We were not like to have, you know, to remember people by their avatars. Online is like a very recent and new phenomena that has very particular effects. It's hard for us to know at the moment exactly what that all means. But it also means, I think, in crypto, there is a little bit of a culture of kind of like, of adversariety between people because of this anonymous and this anonymous culture. But I think as well, so one like specific example that I wanted to kind of like point out of where, you know, I was kind of dealing with this was whenever I first met Kat from ETH Evacuations, where I kind of found her on Twitter where she was sharing the things that she was doing using crypto to help get people out of Gaza. And so I put some messages that I got from friends like at that moment asking me if I knew her, if like, you know, if anybody else knew her. So there was like this intense need for someone to claim that they wanted to do such a like such a nice thing. There was a need for kind of like social proof that this person actually was who they were. And so through the process of basically reaching out, calling, getting more social context about what she was up to, what was going on, and then after that, realizing that she's probably legitimate, and then doing a podcast with her, I think was a way to kind of share, therefore, to a larger audience that, hey, this person is legitimate, there's legitimacy in what they're doing, and we release a podcast in order to help promote the actual endeavor. And so this is like a really interesting kind of like moments for me to kind of like think about how a lot of people wanted to have solidarity. They wanted to use crypto in order to help people get out of Gaza. But there was this intense fear. For example, my friend just don't want to make sure it's not some advanced rug pull. You know, like people did at the same time in such situations know that it very much could be a scam because that is something that people do. And so I found this really interesting paper in my research from this guy named Robert Gooden, where he kind of looks into anonymous solidarity in social movements. So he specifically, the kind of like biggest example of things like this is the Guy Fawkes mask, which signifies, in his paper, he says, not only solidarity, that we are as one, but also multiplicity, that we are many, and as well as interchangeability of each for the other. So for every one of us who falls, 10 more will take our place. And so he talks about how like anonymous and this Guy Fawkes mask was this like really, really interesting symbol for people to take part in and to be able to like express solidarity while also keeping, you know, a level of anonymity by taking part in social movements. And so I think it was really funny because he also mentioned in the paper Solidarity Forever. I don't know if you guys know that song. A classic anthem for a lot of labor unions that they will sing at their protests and whatever else. You know, there is, I think it was a really interesting kind of like, collective action frame that he says for thinking about using the labor union movement as like a way to use collectivity to actually protect the individual while also respecting individuality by expressing solidarity. And so, yeah, this was like a really interesting paper. I really, I think people should check it out. He also mentions things like people want to be a part of social movements if they feel that they are going to win, if they feel like they are popular and people will be a part of it. But yeah, so I think like if we look at, for example, I think these were the protests, Jesus. If we look at the protests in Hong Kong, for example, the Guy Fawkes mask was used a lot as a way to express solidarity with the movement while also respecting or trying to protect one's identity at the same time. And then you can see kind of other versions of this that have already happened in indigenous movements in Mexico. So in Chiapas, you have the EZLN, the Zapatistas, where they all wear black face masks whenever they are interacting with one another. So it's a group of many different indigenous groups that come together and that want to express self-determination. They don't want to be a part of the Mexican state. And as part of that, they wear these black masks so that they can show that everyone is sort of equal in many ways, but also that they are expressing solidarity by doing so. So there is kind of like this precedence in social movements, especially in ones with high adversariety, with indigenous groups in Mexico that I think is really interesting. So I think that, like, if we want to take crypto to the next level, in the sense that to become an actual tool for social movements, I think we have to move past a little bit this liberal mindset of how fascism actually happens, thinking that we can simply vote it all away, thinking that if we simply vote for the non-fascist party, therefore we are anti-fascist. But actually it takes, I think, a whole lot more than that, a much more proactive approach, and that we need to think about supporting actual social movements that are the bulwark against rising fascisms in various countries. So for me, like, usually in crypto, anonymity is wrapped with this idea of like free market fundamentalism, of like anonymous free markets. And while I think there are various situations in which maybe that is very useful, or maybe especially in for those who take part in social movements, we also need international solidarity. We need like a movement where people can take part and be a part in, that isn't simply mediated by consumerism, isn't simply mediated by exchange, but is instead mediated also with solidarity across various groups, across various like social movements and whatever else. That was my presentation. I have a bunch of books in my backpack. I wrote a book called Blockchain Radicals: How Capitalism Ruined Crypto and How to Fix It. That came out this past August. So if you would like one, come up to me quick. And then this Saturday, I have a launch event for another project called Bread Chain Cooperative that I run with a couple of my friends. We're having an event at Moose over by Trep Tower Park. If you want to come down, the event starts at 3 p.m. You can find more information on the Berlin Blockchain Week side events or whatever else. And yeah, that's it.
Maybe there will be one question too, because the song was so hilarious that there should be a question to this wonderful guy. You can shout, scream, please. Okay. One second. I'm not sure. One. Let's try.
Thank you. So I don't know if you've...
Here, Josh. Go.
So I don't know if you've been involved in social movements where they send in like actual, human intelligence, deep cover people. And if you do, you're probably aware that it has an incredibly corrosive effect on trust, kind of psychologically. So, I mean, that's probably why you felt the need to check out this person that's raising ETH for Gaza. So you raised the problem. It's an incredibly hard problem. Like, game theoretically, if one side is whatever, the powers that be, and the other side is fighting them, it's a great strategy. It's like a cheap strategy to kind of partially disable like the people on the other side. Do you have any suggestions how that would work in the much less frictionless world of online? Like defending yourself against that, or strategies for it?
Test. Oh, so you're saying how that may change with the increase of like the use of digital systems? Is that what you mean? Like frictionless? Is that what you mean?
So I guess I'm working on the assumption that it makes it even harder because the costs for them are reduced and the costs for us are increased. So what to do?
Yeah, I think like it's really tough to say. I mean, for me, it is sort of like personally, knowing the person physically is definitely for me like a big bump in trust than like purely digitally. Like knowing what this person looks like, knowing what they're like interested in. There's like that, but then there is of course the tension of like, I mean, yeah, there's like so many factors involved with the digital. It's sort of like you don't really know how surveilled you are until afterwards when they show you how surveilled you were in the court case or something like that. So I mean, that's a very, very difficult question. I think in part is basically, I mean, for me, like we should have been, I mean, not to take away anyone's efforts who has probably been doing that, who may be in the room, but like we should have been building our own technical infrastructure decades ago that is separate from the kind of corporate big tech one that we have today. Like if anyone asks Facebook for data and information, like, and you are in an activist setting, like they're going to give it, you know, like we simply don't have yet the infrastructure that I think, you know, plenty of people are building out more now, and there is like, there's this contradiction of like improvements in technology and like privacy that makes it also easier for us to take and like jam into something else with a different type of logic than just like corporate profit maximizing logic, that then I think we can kind of like ultimately I think that's like what we have to do. Like if we want to have like much more security, we simply have to build our own infrastructure, and that's like a very hard thing to do. I'm not saying that's like that's it, you know, just make it, you know? Yeah, and there's a lot of them. I think it's like yeah, many different things.
Josh, talking about infrastructure, there's the next debate on it, and the dialogue, I would rather say. Thanks a lot for coming. Books, I would say, and he's still around, especially in Berlin.
Yeah.